There are stories in the old territories that the church never wrote down. Stories that the government archives refused to acknowledge. Stories whispered by the last surviving members of wagon trains, spoken only once before madness or death claimed them. This is one of those stories. This is about the Donner Reed Party's forgotten sister caravan, the one that took the southern route, the one that never made it to California, the one that learned how to survive by consuming something far more precious than flesh. In the summer of 1846, when the Mexican-American War was painting the borderlands red and the westward expansion had become a fever dream of manifest destiny, a group of 23 souls departed from Independence, Missouri. They called themselves the Ashford Company, named after their wagon master, a stern Pennsylvania man named Cyrus Ashford, who claimed to know a faster route to the California goldfields, a route that cut through the Arizona territory, through lands that even the Apache avoided during certain seasons, lands where the sun didn't just beat down upon the earth, but seemed to press itself into your very bones, extracting something vital with each passing hour. The company consisted of families, the Ashfords themselves, Cyrus and his wife Margaret, their 3 children, the Blackwood family, James and Sarah, with their twin boys who had just turned 7, the Reverend Thomas Whitmore and his sister Eleanor, missionaries bound for the coastal settlements, the Hartwell family, German immigrants whose English was broken but whose determination was absolute, young couples, old prospectors, a freed slave named Moses who served as a scout, a half-Navajo guide named Running Fox, who had warned them repeatedly not to take the route Cyrus proposed. Running Fox had told them about the desert they would cross. He had used words in his language that had no English translation, words that meant things like the place where time grows hungry and the sands that remember. But Cyrus Ashford was a practical man, a man who believed in maps and compasses and the testimony of one trapper who had supposedly crossed the territory and lived. He paid Running Fox half his fee and sent him away. They would use Moses and Cyrus's own navigation skills. That was their first mistake, but it would not be their last. The journey began well enough. The trail was hard but manageable. The weather, though hot, was bearable in the early morning and late evening hours. They made good time through Kansas, through the edges of what would become Oklahoma. When they crossed into the New Mexico territory, they began to see the landscape change. The green faded. The trees became sparse, then skeletal, then non-existent. The earth itself seemed to harden, to crack, to reject the very notion of life. It was Margaret Ashford who first noticed something strange about the light. She mentioned it to her husband one evening as they made camp near a dried riverbed. The sun, she said, seemed to set differently here, not just in color, though the reds and oranges were more intense, more bloody, but in the way it moved. It seemed to hesitate at the horizon, to linger, to watch them. Cyrus laughed and told her she was tired. The desert played tricks on everyone, he said. It was natural, but Margaret kept watching the sunsets, and she began to notice that the others were watching too. By the time they entered what the old Spanish maps called the Despoblado, the uninhabited place, their water supplies were lower than Cyrus had calculated. His map, purchased from a trader in Santa Fe, showed a series of springs and water sources along their route. The first 2 had been there, barely, enough to refill some barrels. The third was dry. The fourth didn't exist. The map, Moses discovered, had been drawn 30 years prior, before a drought that had rearranged the entire water table of the region. They were 12 days into the desert when the first person died, not from thirst, though water was being rationed carefully, not from heat, though the temperature reached levels that made the air shimmer and dance. Old Samuel Hartwell simply stopped He was walking beside his wagon one moment, and the next he had fallen to his knees, staring at his hands. His daughter ran to him. He looked at her with eyes that seemed confused, lost. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came, and then he was gone. His heart had simply stopped beating. He was 68 years old, but when they prepared his body for burial, his hair had turned completely white, and his skin had the texture of parchment that had been left in the sun for years. They buried him shallow. The ground was too hard for a proper grave. Reverend Whitmore said words over the mound of stones they placed, and they moved on, because stopping meant dying, and dying meant failing. And failure was not something men like Cyrus Ashford could accept. The second death came 3 days later. One of the Blackwood twins, Henry, who had been complaining of feeling cold despite the 110-degree heat, he died in the night, curled in his mother's arms, his skin ice-cold to the touch. When morning came, and they unwrapped him from his blanket to prepare him for burial, they found that his body had not begun to decompose. In that heat, in that dry air, decomposition should have been rapid, but Henry looked as if he were sleeping. His brother Harold stood over the grave and didn't cry. He just stared at the stones with an expression that was too old for his face. It was after Henry's burial that Moses came to Cyrus with a discovery. He had been scouting ahead, looking for any sign of water, any indication that they were approaching the mountains where the map promised a river. Instead, he had found something else. Tracks. Not animal tracks, not native tracks, human tracks, barefoot, but strange. The stride was wrong, Moses said, too long, and the depth of the impression suggested someone very heavy, or someone who had stood in one spot for a very long time, sinking slowly into the hard pan. They followed the tracks, not because Cyrus wanted to, but because the tracks were heading in the direction they needed to go, and in the desert, any sign of human presence meant potential salvation, or at least information. The tracks led the Smedzim to a place where the desert floor dipped into a shallow basin, a place where the rocks were darker, almost black, and arranged in patterns that were clearly not natural. In the center of the basin stood a structure, not a building exactly, more like the skeleton of a building, or the memory of one. Adobe walls that had mostly crumbled, wooden beams that were bleached white and smooth as bone. The air around the structure seemed different somehow, thicker, as if time itself moved more slowly there, as if each second had to push through something viscous and resistant to pass from one moment to the next. The temperature dropped as they approached, not dramatically, but enough to notice, enough to make them pull their jackets tighter, despite the 100-degree heat just yards away. And inside, visible even from a distance, something that made them all stop their wagons and stare. Water, or what looked like water. A pool, perhaps 15 feet across, perfectly circular, perfectly still. The surface had a quality that was difficult to describe. It was like looking at mercury, or at a mirror made of liquid, or at a window into some other place entirely. The color was wrong. Water in the desert, when you found it, was brown or green or red with minerals. This was silver, not the silver of metal, but the silver of moonlight on glass, the silver of reflection itself made tangible. In the middle of the Arizona desert, in the heart of the Despoblado, in a place where no water should exist, this impossible pool waited as if it had been expecting them all along. Cyrus ordered them to make camp. Margaret protested quietly, saying that something felt wrong about this place. Eleanor Whitmore agreed, touching the small cross she wore around her neck and murmuring prayers. But the men were already unhitching the oxen, already moving toward the pool with empty canteens and desperate hope. Moses reached it first. He knelt beside it, cupped his hand, prepared to drink. Then he stopped. He leaned closer, his dark face creasing with confusion. He reached out and touched the surface of the pool. His finger went through, but there was no ripple, no splash. The surface remained perfectly still, perfectly glass-like. He pulled his hand back quickly and wiped it on his pants. His fingers were dry. Cyrus joined him, irritated by the hesitation. He bent down, thrust his hand into the pool up to the wrist. When he pulled it out, it was bone dry, not even damp. He stared at it, then at the pool, then back at his hand. He thrust it in again. Same result. The pool was not water. It was something else. Something that looked like water but had no substance, no texture, no temperature. It was a reflection without a source. The Reverend Whitmore approached carefully, his Bible in his hands. He looked at the pool for a long moment, then at the ruins surrounding it. He began to examine the walls, the stones arranged in circles around the basin. He called his sister over, and together they studied the markings on the stones. Not Spanish, not native, something older, symbols that hurt to look at directly, that seemed to squirm and shift when you tried to focus on them. Eleanor recognized one of the symbols. She had seen it once before, in a book that her seminary professor had kept locked in his private library, a book he had warned his students never to read, a book that had been brought back from the Inquisition trials in Mexico City. The symbol meant consumption, or translation, or transubstantiation. The word had multiple meanings, multiple interpretations, but the core idea was the same: transformation through devouring. They decided to camp away from the pool on the far side of the basin. It was the only flat ground for miles, and they were too exhausted to continue. That night, as they sat around small fires, eating the last of their salted pork and hardtack, Sarah Blackwood voiced what they were all thinking. How much longer could they survive? They had water for perhaps 4 more days, if they cut rations even further. Food for maybe a week, and they were still at least 20 days from the mountains, from the river, from salvation. The mathematics of survival were simple and brutal. They would die here. That night, Harold Blackwood disappeared. His mother woke to find his blanket empty, his shoes still beside her. She screamed, and the camp erupted into chaos. They searched by torchlight, calling his name into the darkness. Moses found his tracks, leading toward the center of the basin, toward the pool. They followed them. The track stopped at the edge of the pool, and they did not continue on the other side. There were other tracks, though, leading away from the pool, the same strange barefoot tracks Moses had found earlier, but these were fresh and small, child-sized. But the stride was wrong, too long, as if Harold were taking steps that covered 3 times the distance they should. They followed the tracks until they vanished into the hardpan, simply ceasing to exist, as if the person making them had been lifted into the air. When morning came, Harold had not returned. Sarah Blackwood sat beside her wagon, holding her remaining son, both of them silent, both of them staring at nothing. It was James Blackwood who went to the pool the next day, not to search for his lost son, but because he had been thinking about what the pool was, what it might be. He had been a school teacher back in Ohio before the gold fever had taken him. He had read philosophy, theology, natural sciences, and he had an idea that terrified him but that he could not shake. He stood at the edge of the pool and spoke to it. He felt foolish at first, talking to what might be nothing more than an optical illusion. But then he remembered the tracks, the dry hand, the symbols on the stones. This place was not natural. This place was not empty. Something was here. Something that existed in a way that his everyday understanding of reality could not accommodate. He asked it questions, simple ones at first. "Can you hear me? Are you alive? Do you hunger?" He received no answers, but he felt something, a presence, a weight, an attention turning toward him. And then he asked the question that would doom them all. "Can you give us more time?" The pool rippled just once, a single ripple that spread from the center to the edge, then back again, defying physics, defying logic. And in that ripple, James Blackwood saw something, a reflection, but not his own, a reflection of himself as he had been, younger, stronger, his face less lined, his hair less gray. He saw himself as he had been 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30. The pool was showing him his own time, his own past, his own life, flowing backward. When he told the others what he had experienced, they thought the heat had gotten to him. But Margaret Ashford had heard stories. Stories from her grandmother, who had come from the old country, from a place where people still remembered things that the modern world had forgotten. Stories about places of power, places where the walls between what was and what could be grew thin, places where sacrifices were made not of blood or flesh, but of something more fundamental, something that every living being carried within them from birth to death. That night, Margaret went to the pool alone. She brought with her a small leather journal that she had been keeping since independence, a record of their journey, their hopes, their fears. She stood at the edge of the pool and opened the journal to the first page. She read her own words, written months ago, words full of optimism and excitement, and then she tore the page out. She held it over the pool, and she let it drop. The page touched the surface and vanished, not burned, not dissolved, simply ceased to exist in the present moment. And Margaret felt something, a sensation like drinking cold water when you were desperately thirsty, but the thirst was not in her throat. It was in her bones, in her blood. She felt lighter, younger, stronger. She looked at her hands and saw that the sun damage, the age spots, the wrinkles around her knuckles had faded slightly, as if the page she had sacrificed to the pool contained not just words, but the time those words represented. And by feeding that time to whatever lived in the pool, she had reclaimed some of it for herself. She returned to camp and told no one. But the next morning, when they prepared to move on, Cyrus noticed that his wife looked different, rested, healthy, almost glowing. He asked her if she felt well. She smiled and said she had never felt better. They traveled for 2 more days. The water ran out. They were drinking from the barrels now, the last reserves, and even those were nearly gone. The heat was relentless. The sun seemed to follow them, to track them, to press down upon them with a weight that was almost tangible. 2 more people collapsed, old Mrs. Hartwell and one of the young prospectors, a boy named Timothy, who couldn't have been more than 19. They did not die, not immediately, but they could not walk. They lay in the wagons, breathing but not conscious, their skin hot and dry and papery. That evening Margaret told Cyrus what she had done, what she had discovered. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable in the firelight. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he asked her to take him to the pool. They would return there. It was only a half-day's journey back. They would make camp at the ruins again, and they would learn the rules of this place. Because if what Margaret said was true, if the pool could give them more time, could give them more strength, more endurance, then they had found their salvation. They had found a way to survive. The decision was made. They turned the wagons around. Moses protested. Eleanor Whitmore protested, but Cyrus was the wagon master, and the others were desperate enough to believe in anything that offered hope. They reached the ruins the next afternoon. This time, they made camp in the basin itself, surrounding the pool, as if by being close to it, they could absorb some of its power. That night, Cyrus conducted an experiment. He took his own journal, a record of their journey's supplies and routes, and he carefully removed a single page. A page dated 3 weeks prior, a mundane accounting of distances traveled and rations consumed. He held it over the pool and released it. It vanished, and he felt what Margaret had felt. That sensation of drinking something that wasn't water, that feeling of restoration. When he opened his eyes, his vision was clearer. The headache that had been plaguing him for days was gone. He felt as if he had slept for 10 hours instead of the restless 3 he had managed the night before. Word spread through the camp. Within hours, everyone was at the pool. They brought journals, letters, old newspapers they had been saving, anything with writing on it, anything that contained a record of time. They fed the pages to the pool, one by one, and with each sacrifice they felt stronger, felt more alive. The transformation was remarkable. People who had been dying of thirst and heat exhaustion were now walking around the camp with energy, with purpose. The pool was saving them. The pool was giving them the time they needed to reach California. But there were rules. They discovered them through trial and error, through careful observation. The pool would only accept written records. Blank pages did nothing. The writing had to be personal, had to be connected to the person making the sacrifice. Someone else's letter would not work. And the further back in time the writing represented, the more potent the effect. A page written yesterday might give you a few hours of restored vitality. A page written 10 years ago might give you a full day. They also discovered that the pool was not selective about what kind of time it accepted. A page describing joy and happiness worked just as well as a page describing sorrow and pain. The emotional content did not matter, only the temporal content. The pool consumed time itself, the recorded moments, and in exchange, it gave back physical time, biological time, the hours and days and weeks that the desert had been stealing from their bodies. For 3 days, they lived at the ruins. They did not travel. They simply existed, feeding the pool, restoring themselves. They burned through their journals, their letters from home, their family Bibles with birth and death records. The Reverend Whitmore was the most reluctant participant. He argued that what they were doing was unholy, that they were trafficking with forces they did not understand. But even he, eventually, succumbed, because his sister was dying. Eleanor had been declining rapidly, and no amount of rest or shade could help her. So he took his own Bible, his personal copy that he had carried since his ordination, and he removed the pages where he had written his sermons, his private prayers, his conversations with God. He fed them to the pool one by one. And Eleanor recovered. She sat up. She drank water. She spoke. And the Reverend wept, not knowing if his tears were from joy or from the terrible certainty that he had just committed a sin that no amount of repentance could erase. It was Moses who first noticed the side effects. He had been observing the group carefully, watching how people changed after visiting the pool. The physical restoration was obvious. People walked with more energy. Their skin regained color. Their eyes grew brighter. But there were other changes, subtle ones. People would forget things, small things at first, the name of a town they had passed through, the day of the week, the exact date. Someone would start to tell a story about their childhood and trail off mid-sentence, unable to remember what happened next. A mother would look at her child and pause, just for a fraction of a second, as if trying to recall the child's name. A man would wake up in the morning and spend several minutes staring at his wife, his expression confused, before recognition returned. But then the forgetting became more pronounced. Sarah Blackwood could not remember what her husband did for a living before they had left Ohio. She knew he had worked. She knew there had been a building, an office perhaps, or a school, but the details were gone. When James Blackwood struggled to recall his parents' names, spending an entire evening sitting by the fire, saying names aloud, trying each one like a key in a lock, hoping one would fit, hoping one would feel right. But none of them did. His parents had become abstractions, concepts without form, love without object. The memories were not just fading. They were vanishing completely, as if they had never existed, as if the past itself was being rewritten, edited, redacted. People would reach for a memory and find nothing there, not even the shadow of a memory, not even the awareness that something was missing, just absence, just void. And in that void, something else was growing, a sense of displacement, a feeling of being unmoored from time's itself. They were becoming temporal orphans, people without history, without origin, without the chain of causation that connected them to every moment they had lived before this one. Moses brought his concerns to Cyrus. The pool was not just taking their written records. It was taking the memories those records contained. The personal history they had sacrificed to survive was being erased from their minds. They were trading their past for their future, and the more they used the pool, the more of themselves they lost. Cyrus dismissed the concern, so they forgot a few details. So what? The alternative was death. He would rather be alive and forgetful than dead and commemorated. The others agreed. They had come too far to turn back now. They would use the pool until they had enough strength to reach the mountains. Then they would leave this place behind and never speak of it again. But the pool had other ideas. On the fourth night at the ruins, Harold Blackwood returned. He walked into the camp just after sunset, naked, his feet making those strange too long strides that Moses had tracked days before. His mother screamed and ran to him, embracing him, weeping. But Harold did not respond. He stood still, his arms at his sides, his eyes open but unseeing. His skin was cold, his chest did not rise and fall with breath. And when Sarah pulled back to look at his face, she saw that his eyes were not blue anymore. They were the same color as the pool, that same strange reflective quality, showing not what was, but what had been. Harold opened his mouth and spoke, but the voice was not his own. It was older, deeper, layered with echoes. It spoke in English, but the accent was strange, archaic. It said, "You have been feeding, now you must pay." The camp fell silent. Everyone had gathered around the boy, this thing that looked like Harold, but was not Harold. Cyrus stepped forward and demanded to know what it wanted. The boy's head turned toward him with a movement that was too smooth, too fluid, like something moving underwater. It said, "The pool does not give freely. The pool is a mouth. The pool is a stomach. What you have fed it, it has consumed. But consumption requires balance. What is taken must be returned. What is eaten must be digested. You have taken time. Now you must give it back." Eleanor Whitmore collapsed. She fell to the ground, clutching her chest, gasping. Her brother ran to her, held her. She aged before his eyes. The restoration the pool had given her reversed itself in seconds, then accelerated. Her hair turned white, then began to fall out. Her skin sagged, wrinkled, spotted with age. Her bones became visible beneath her flesh. She tried to speak, but her voice was a rasp, a whisper, and then she was gone. She looked like she was 100 years old. She had been 38. The thing wearing Harold's face watched this happen with no expression. Then it said, "The price is different for each of you. What you have taken, you will give back, but not in the way you expect. The pool does not want your death. It wants your time, your memory, your history. Everything you have been, you will cease to have been. And when there is nothing left to remember, then you may leave, or you may stay. It makes no difference to the pool." And then Harold collapsed. He fell like a puppet with cut strings. Sarah grabbed him, shook him, screamed his name. His eyes opened, blue again, confused. He looked at his mother and asked where he was. He did not remember leaving the camp. He did not remember anything after his brother's funeral. He had lost 4 days. Panic swept through the camp. They had to leave immediately. They began packing the wagons, throwing supplies together without care or organization. But as they worked, people began to stop, to stare at their hands, to touch their faces, to look at each other with growing confusion. The Reverend Whitmore could not remember his sister's name. James Blackwood forgot he had been married. Margaret Ashford looked at her children and saw strangers. The pool was claiming its price. Everything they had sacrificed to it, every written word, every recorded moment, was being erased not just from paper, but from existence. The memories were being deleted. The past was being consumed. And as the past vanished, the people themselves began to fade. Not physically, but in every other way that mattered. They were becoming hollow, empty vessels with no history, no identity, no self. Moses was the first to understand what was happening. He had not used the pool as much as the others. He had only sacrificed a few pages from a ledger he kept, simple notations of weather and trail conditions. So he still retained most of his memories, most of his self. He gathered the few people who were still coherent and told them the truth. The pool was not a gift, oh, it was a trap. It was a parasite that fed on human time, on human history. And once it had begun feeding, it would not stop until there was nothing left. They had to run, not back the way they came. That was too far, and they would die in the desert before they reached water. Forward, toward the mountains. It was 20 days away, maybe more, but if they rationed their strength, if they only used the pool sparingly to keep themselves alive, they might make it, they might survive. But the pool would not let them go easily. That night, as they tried to sleep, they heard sounds. Footsteps circling the camp, voices calling out in languages none of them recognized, and laughter. Dry, crackling laughter like old paper being crumpled. When they looked toward the pool, they saw figures standing around it, human-shaped, but wrong. Their proportions were distorted. Their movements were jerky, unnatural. They were made of shadow and reflection, things without substance, ghosts that existed only in the moment between was and is. One of the shadows approached the camp. It was wearing the face of old Samuel Hartwell, the first to die. It spoke with his voice, but the words were not his own. It said, "Why do you run? We are still here. We have always been here. We are the ones who came before. We are the ones who used the pool. We are the ones who paid the price. And now we live in the time we sacrificed. We exist in the past, in the written word, in the recorded moment. And when you erase your past to survive your present, you erase us too. So we come back. We reclaim what was taken. We restore the balance." The shadow of Samuel Hartwell reached out toward the nearest wagon. His hand passed through the wood like smoke, and where his hand touched, the wagon aged. The wood cracked, splintered, turned gray and brittle. Within seconds, the wagon collapsed into a pile of rotted lumber and rust. The oxen yoked to it, panicked, broke free, ran into the desert, and vanished. The camp erupted into chaos. People fled in all directions, some toward the pool, some away from it, some simply running with no destination in mind. The shadows followed, touching people, touching things, aging them, eroding them, stealing their time just as the people had stolen time from the pool. Moses grabbed Cyrus and Margaret Ashford and their children and pulled them toward one of the remaining wagons. He whipped the oxen into motion, and they fled the basin, leaving behind the pool, the ruins, the shadows, and the screaming. They drove through the night and into the next day, not stopping, not resting. The wagon behind them held 3 other survivors, the Blackwood family, somehow intact despite everything. They drove until the oxen collapsed from exhaustion. Then they walked. They walked until their feet bled. They walked until the sun had burned away any thought beyond the next step. It took them 11 days to reach the mountains. 11 days of walking through hell with no water, no food, nothing but the fading strength in their bodies and the desperate will to survive. 4 of them died along the way. Cyrus Ashford, his eldest son, James Blackwood, and the youngest, Ashford Child, a girl of 5, whose name her mother could no longer remember. When the 7 survivors finally stumbled into a Mexican settlement at the base of the mountains, they were barely human. Their skin was burned black. Their lips were cracked and bleeding. Their eyes were vacant. They could not speak coherently. They could not remember where they had come from or where they were going. The Mexican settlers gave them water, gave them food, gave them shelter, and slowly, over weeks, they recovered. Physically, but the psychological damage was permanent. Margaret Ashford could remember nothing of her life before the desert. Not her husband, not her lost children, not her home in Pennsylvania. Moses could remember fragments, disjointed pieces that did not connect into a coherent whole. Sarah Blackwood remembered her sons, but could not remember her husband's face or voice. The 2 surviving Ashford children remembered nothing at all. They had to be told their own names. The Reverend Thomas Whitmore, the only member of his family to survive, spent the rest of his life trying to remember his sister. He wrote down everything he could recall about her, filling journal after journal, as if by recording her existence he could bring her back. But the memories grew fainter with each passing year. By the time he died, 30 years later, he could not remember her name. He could only remember that she had existed, that she had been important, and that he had lost her in the desert. Moses lived the longest of all the survivors. He made it to California, worked as a guide for other wagon trains, and eventually settled in Sacramento. He never spoke of what happened in the Arizona desert, but he kept a small leather journal that he never wrote in. He carried it with him everywhere, as if its blank pages were a testament to something he had learned. That some stories should never be recorded, that some memories should never be preserved. Because once you write them down, once you give them substance and form, they become vulnerable. They become food for the things that hunger in the darkness, the things that live in the places where time grows thin. The ruins in the Despoblado still exist, or so the stories say. The Apache avoid them. The Mexican traders avoid them. Even the American prospectors, in their arrogance and greed, give that place a wide berth. Because sometimes, on clear nights, travelers claim to see lights in that basin. They see shadows moving around a pool that reflects a sky that is not the one above, and they hear sounds, the rustling of paper, the scratch of a pen, the whisper of voices reading aloud from journals that no longer exist. And sometimes, rarely, a traveler will find a page lying in the sand near the ruins. A page torn from a journal, or a Bible, or a letter. The paper is old but perfectly preserved. The ink is still dark. The words are still legible. But when you read them, you find that they describe events that never happened. They tell stories of people who never lived. They record days and weeks and months that never existed in any timeline that our world acknowledges. Those are the stolen times, the sacrificed moments, the memories that were fed to the pool and digested and transformed into something else. Something that exists outside of causality, outside of history, outside of the linear progression from past to future that we take for granted. Those pages are proof that time is not a river flowing in one direction. It is an ocean, deep and dark and full of things that swim in the depths, things that are always hungry, always waiting for the unwary to dip their hands beneath the surface. The Ashford Company was never officially recorded as lost because there were survivors. 7 people who made it to California. 7 people who were recorded in the census of 1847. But if you look at the records, if you dig deep into the archives, you find inconsistencies. The survivors' stories do not match. Their ages are wrong. Their relationships contradict each other. It is as if the people who arrived in California were not the same people who left Independence. As if something fundamental about them had been rewritten, edited, consumed, and excreted in a form that resembled humanity, but lacked some essential quality that makes a person truly real. In 1863, during the Civil War, a Union Army patrol exploring the Arizona Territory for potential railway routes came across the ruins in the Despoblado. Their commander, a Captain Richard Hayes, made a detailed report of what they found. He described the circular basin, the crumbled adobe structures, the strange symbols carved into the stones. And he described the pool. He noted that it appeared to be water, but could not be touched or tasted. He noted the perfect stillness of its surface. And he noted something else, something that made his superiors classify the report and bury it in the archives for the next 120 years. Captain Hayes reported that his men, while exploring the site, found journals, dozens of them, scattered around the ruins, half buried in the sand. The journals were in various languages, English, Spanish, German, and others that the captain did not recognize. The dates on the journals ranged from 1700 and something to 1846. All of them told similar stories. Travelers crossing the desert, dying of thirst, finding the pool, learning to feed it, and then the entries would stop, sometimes abruptly, mid-sentence, sometimes with a final notation that read something like, "We are going to make camp here tonight," or "Tomorrow we will resume our journey." But there were never any more entries after that, and there were never any bodies. Captain Hayes ordered his men to collect the journals and bring them back to the fort for further study. But on the ride back, something happened. The men began to forget things. Small details at first, then larger ones. By the time they reached the fort, none of them could remember where they had found the journals. The captain himself could not remember why he had ordered them collected. When they opened the journals to examine them, they found that the pages were blank, every single one, as if the words had evaporated or as if they had never been written in the first place. The captain filed his report anyway, describing what he thought he remembered. But his superiors dismissed it as heat exhaustion and hallucination. The desert played tricks on men's minds. Everyone knew that. The report was filed away and forgotten, and the army never sent another patrol to the Despoblado. But the stories continued. Native American tribes in the region had stories about the place that predated European contact by centuries. They called it different names in different languages, but the core story was always the same. It was a place where the gods had tried to preserve time, to capture it, to store it, to keep it from flowing away into oblivion. But the experiment had failed, or maybe it had succeeded too well. The time that was stored there became aware. It developed a hunger. It learned to consume. And now it existed as a wound in reality, a place where the normal rules did not apply, where cause and effect could be reversed or erased or rewritten entirely. The tribes taught their children to avoid that place. They taught them never to write things down near it, never to bring records or histories or names, because the pool would take them. The pool would eat them, and in exchange for devouring your past, it would offer you a few more moments of present, a few more hours of life. But those hours would be hollow. They would be empty. They would be time without meaning, existence without identity, life without a self. Margaret Ashford, in the years after the desert, tried many times to write down what had happened. She felt that the story needed to be told, that people needed to be warned. But every time she put pen to paper, the words would not come. Her hand would shake. Her mind would go blank. It was as if some part of her knew that recording the story would give the pool power over it, would allow it to consume the memory, to erase the warning, to ensure that the trap remained set for the next group of desperate travelers. So she stopped trying. She lived out the rest of her life in San Francisco, working as a seamstress, raising the 2 children whose names she could not quite remember, but whose faces she knew. She died in 1871 at the age of 62, though her gravestone listed her age as 53. No one could explain the discrepancy. The records were unclear. It was as if 9 years of her life had simply ceased to exist in any official capacity. Moses died in 1902. He was believed to be around 75 years old, though again the records were inconsistent. On his deathbed, he finally spoke about the desert. He told his daughter about the pool, about the ruins, about the price they had paid to survive. He told her that he had been carrying a blank journal for 56 years as a reminder that some things should never be written down, that some knowledge should never be preserved, that some stories should be allowed to fade into obscurity, because the alternative was worse. The alternative was immortality, but immortality as a memory in something else's mind. Immortality as food for the thing that ate time. His daughter listened. She did not know whether to believe him. Old men often told strange stories near the end, mixing memory with dream, fact with fiction. But after he died, she found the journal among his possessions. The blank journal. She opened it, intending to keep it as a memento. And as she held it, as she flipped through the empty pages, she felt something, a sensation like hunger, but not in her stomach, in her mind, in her sense of self, as if the journal wanted to be filled, as if it was waiting for her to write something, anything, so that it could consume it. She threw the journal into the fireplace and watched it burn. But as it burned, she could have sworn she heard something, a sound like water dripping, or like pages turning, or like a voice very far away, whispering words in a language she did not understand. The ruins still stand. The pool still waits. And travelers still cross the Arizona desert, following routes that are now paved highways, driving air-conditioned vehicles, carrying bottled water and GPS devices. They have no idea what lies just a few miles off the road. They have no reason to explore the despoblado, no cause to venture into the basin where the strange symbols mark the stones. But sometimes a car breaks down. Sometimes a hiker gets lost. Sometimes someone wanders away from the trail and finds themselves standing in a circular basin looking at ruins that should not exist, and a pool that reflects a sky that is not quite the right color. And if they are unlucky, if they are desperate, if they are foolish, they might try to touch the water. They might try to drink, and the pool will offer them a choice: suffer and die in the desert, or sacrifice something to survive. Something that seems small at first: a written memory, a recorded moment, a page from a journal or a photo on a phone or a video saved to the cloud. The pool has adapted to modern times. It still hungers for the same thing it has always hungered for, but now it can consume digital records just as easily as paper ones. Now it can eat timestamps and metadata and GPS coordinates. Now it can devour not just your past, but your documentation of your present, your proof that you exist in this moment, in this place, in this reality. The price remains the same: pay with time, pay with memory, pay with self, and maybe you will survive. Maybe you will make it out of the desert, but you will leave something behind, something essential, and the pool will keep it. The pool will store it. The pool will digest it. And when there's nothing left of you but a name without a history and a face without a past, then you will be free to go. Or you can refuse. You can choose to die rather than pay. And the desert will take you, as it has taken so many before. You will become bones in the sand. You will become a cautionary tale that no one tells because no one remembers. You will become another unnamed victim of the frontier, another statistic in the brutal mathematics of westward expansion. The choice is yours, but choose quickly, because the pool is patient. The pool is eternal. The pool has eaten centuries. It has consumed the memories of thousands. It has digested the histories of entire caravans, entire tribes, entire civilizations. What you carry within you, what you think of as your life, your story, your identity, is nothing to the pool. It is just another morsel, another meal, another moment to be swallowed and forgotten. And when the pool is done with you, when it has taken everything you have to give, it will still be there. It will still be waiting. It will still be hungry, because time is infinite. And hunger, once awakened, never truly sleeps. The Ashford Company learned this truth too late. They learned that survival is not always worth the price. They learned that there are things in the desert worse than death, things that will keep you alive long past the point where life has any meaning, things that will preserve your body while erasing your soul, things that will let you walk out of the desert as a hollow shell, a person-shaped void, a memory that has forgotten itself. So if you find yourself in the Arizona territory, if you wander off the beaten path, if you see ruins in a circular basin and a pool that reflects the sky, turn back. Do not approach. Do not touch. Do not offer it anything, because the pool is not salvation. The pool is damnation. The pool is the price we pay for trying to cheat time, for trying to outlive our allotted span, for believing that survival is the only value worth preserving. The travelers who ate time to survive the desert learned the truth. They learned that time is not meant to be consumed. It is meant to be lived, moment by moment, memory by memory, each second precious because it is fleeting, each day meaningful because it will not come again. We are not meant to hoard time. We are not meant to stretch it or store it or sacrifice pieces of it to buy a few more hours. We are meant to spend it, wisely or foolishly, joyfully or sorrowfully, with purpose or without, but always moving forward, always allowing the past to remain past, always accepting that what is gone cannot be reclaimed, that what is written cannot be unwritten, that what is remembered must be honored, not consumed. The pool offers the opposite. It offers the illusion of victory over time, the fantasy that we can outmaneuver mortality, that we can game the system, that we can survive anything if we are just willing to pay the price. But the price is always too high. The price is always everything we are. And in paying it, we become nothing. We become empty vessels carrying no cargo. We become travelers with no destination, wanderers with no home, survivors with no story to tell. The Ashford Company became ghosts. Not in the supernatural sense, though perhaps in that sense too. But ghosts in the metaphorical sense. People who existed but did not live. People who survived but did not thrive. People who made it to California but never arrived. They carried on for years, for decades, going through the motions of life, but the spark was gone. The self had been devoured. They were echoes of people they could no longer remember being. And somewhere in the Arizona desert, in a basin marked by ancient stones and unholy symbols, a pool waits, still and silent and perfectly reflective, showing not what is, but what was, showing not the present, but the past, showing not the sky above, but the sky that existed in moments long since consumed. And around that pool, if you listen carefully, you can hear them, the travelers, the ones who came before, the ones who paid the price, the ones who sacrificed their time to survive. They are still there, trapped in the moments they gave away, existing in a liminal space between was and is, forever reading journals that no longer exist, forever retracing steps that lead nowhere, forever calling out warnings that no one can hear. They are the proof that some hungers cannot be satisfied, that some prices cannot be paid, that some frontiers were never meant to be crossed. They are the proof that the desert keeps its secrets, that the past cannot be escaped, that time, once consumed, becomes a poison that spreads through everything, corrupting memory, eroding identity, devouring self. The Ashford Company tried to eat time. Instead, time ate them, and it is still hungry. It is always hungry, and it will be hungry long after the last human has crossed the last desert, long after the last story has been told, long after the last written word has crumbled into dust, because time does not belong to us. We belong to it. We are its creatures, its children, its food, and when we try to steal it, when we try to hoard it, when we try to preserve it beyond its natural span, we learn the hardest lesson of all. We learn that some frontiers exist not to be crossed, but to be respected. Some boundaries exist not to be broken, but to be honored. Some hungers exist not to be fed, but to be starved. The pool in the desert has been fed too much. It has grown too strong. It has consumed too many stories, too many memories, too many lives, and now it waits, patient and eternal, for the next traveler who will be foolish enough, desperate enough, or unlucky enough to offer it another meal, another page, another moment, another piece of time that should have been left alone. Do not be that traveler. Do not follow in the footsteps of the Ashford Company. Do not let your thirst overcome your judgment. Do not let your desperation overcome your wisdom. Because the pool offers only one thing, survival. But survival without self is not survival at all. It is a different kind of death, a death that takes years to complete, a death that leaves you walking and talking and breathing, but hollow, empty, erased. The travelers who ate time did not survive the desert. They merely delayed their dying, and in that delay, they lost everything that made them worth saving. They lost their past. They lost their identity. They lost their humanity. And in exchange, they gained nothing but a few more days of empty existence, days that stretched into years, years that stretched into lifetimes, lifetimes of walking through the world as shadows of themselves, remembering nothing, feeling nothing, being nothing. That is the true price of feeding the pool. Not death, but unlife. Not oblivion, but awareness of oblivion. Not ending, but continuation without purpose, without meaning, without self. So remember this story. Remember the Ashford Company. Remember what they found in the Arizona desert in the summer of 1846. Remember the pool that seemed to offer salvation, but delivered only damnation. Remember the price they paid to survive. And if you remember nothing else, remember this. Some frontiers were never meant to be crossed. Some hungers were never meant to be fed, and sometimes were never meant to be eaten. The desert remembers. The pool remembers. And now, you remember too. Let that be enough. Let that be the lesson. Let that be the warning. Do not go to the despoblado. Do not seek the ruins. Do not touch the pool, because the pool is patient. The pool is hungry, and the pool never forgets. Even when you have forgotten everything else, even when your name is gone, and your face is gone, and your story is gone, the pool will remember you. It will remember the taste of your time. It will remember the flavor of your memories, and it will wait for you to return, to feed it again, to give it more, to sacrifice everything you have left, until there is nothing remaining but the hunger itself. That is the fate of those who try to survive by consuming time. They become the consumed. They become the meal. They become the warning. And the pool, endless and patient and perfectly still, continues to wait.